It is 10 a.m., so we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for being with us this morning. I just filled everybody in on the communication on this webinar. But once again, if you've just joined us, I'm going to share that information again. Please be aware that we, as the panelists, cannot see you. You can only see us. We also cannot hear you. The only way that we can communicate with you, hear from you, is through the chat at the bottom of your screen. And please be sure that if you are going to communicate with all of the panelists and all of the attendees, that you click on that blue bar and choose that option. Or if you just want to share something with the panelists, then choose the panelists. But we will go ahead and get started. I am Amy Ezel, and I am with the Center for Communication with the Arkansas Conference of the United Methodist Church. So glad to have you all on this morning. Super excited about what we're about to hear and partake in. I'm going to turn this over now to my friend and colleague, Kelly Reap, who is the Director of Communications for Methodist Family Health.
Thank you, Amy. Good morning to everyone. I'm so glad to see everyone that has joined this morning. I also want to say it's my good fortune that I get to work with Amy Ezel, Amy Shores, and Joshua Rout. It's not easy to keep me between the lines, but they seem to do a pretty good job of it. So if they have any, if they can help me, they can absolutely help you. Joshua Rout is one of our mobile assessors, and he lives in Conway. And then Amy Shores of Pastoral Care. And Josh, I'm going to turn it over to you. You're going to talk about emotional intelligence.
Yes, definitely. Like she said, I'm Josh Rout. I've been a therapist practicing for about 18 years. Started doing mobile assessment recently, a couple of years ago, and I love it. I love working for Methodist. So yeah, I want to talk about some the importance of emotional intelligence. And so I'm going to talk about a couple of different aspects of emotional intelligence and how important it is to be able to communicate those things. Because essentially emotional intelligence is being able to understand and navigate your own emotions and also the emotions of others, right? So, so that's what emotional intelligence is. So first, I want to show a little video of a sweet couple communicating.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
No, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... Sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. Ow. If you would just...
Don't...
Try to see things my way. Do I have to keep on talking till I can't go on? We can work it out.
All right, so from watching that for the panelist, what is the issue? What do you think needs to happen, or what does she need? Any ideas?
Well, I would say first off, she just wants to be heard.
Okay. Yep. So
She
I
doesn't
think,
necessarily want the nail to be gone. She just wants him to listen to her.
yeah. So there's a couple of different levels here, right? And we see this when we communicate with our spouses or our children, right? Is that we think we know what they need, right? And so we think, okay, well, that nail needs to get out, right? That nail needs to be gone. And then all of the things that she's having issues with would be gone as well. But she says very clearly what it is she needed. And she needed him to listen. So there's a couple of different levels there, right? Like ultimately, she needs the nail out of her head and all of those issues will go away. But at that present time, what she needed is to be heard. And so we have to be able to listen to our spouses or our partners or our children and understand and just believe what they tell us, right? I need ... Now, of course, with good communication, then we could talk to her and say, okay, so when did this achy stuff start happening? Well, I don't know, maybe, when we were remodeling our bathroom, it was when they were doing that framing. Okay, so it was about the time they were framing, when they were hammering stuff and doing, okay, yeah, so when you put on your sweaters, let's look at them, like, where is the snag? Okay, and then, and you ask a series of questions that eventually, once they're heard, then you can start, asking these questions that will help them come to the knowledge that you've got a nail in your head. And, and so anyway, but it's all about communication. It's being able to, one of my favorite parts in that video is when she's like, and it's aching, I don't know. And he does his kind of sideways eyes. It's one of my favorites because of how important nonverbal communication is. And that our goal is to be able, and part of emotional intelligence is being able to communicate with someone and not just hear the words that they're saying, but how they're saying it, their facial expressions, their tone, to kind of get maybe the emotions behind the words. Because honestly, when you think about words versus tone and whatever, like you could look at a dog and say, you're a horrible dog. I love you, dog. You're the best dog ever. And if you're yelling at it, it's still going to cower, right? And you can say the worst things like, you are such a horrible puppy. Come here. You are so ugly. And they'll just be excited because, it's your tone. It's how you say things. So it's just really important that we learn our emotional intelligence so that we can communicate things effectively. So in understanding emotional intelligence and to help it out, I want to talk about two concepts that are really important. And I talk a lot with my hands. So I know my daughter, when I've been giving speeches before, she always does this in the audience to let me know I'm like gesturing too much. But
Josh,
anyway.
Very good company.
Good. Yes.
It's part of the nonverbal communication.
Exactly right. Yes. Okay. So the concept is that the first one is this, is that life is understood and experienced through language, right? Language is how we share things. It's how we connect. It's how we build relationships. It's all through language. Language is how life is understood, defined, explained, and experienced. So we are happy because there's the word happy, right? If we didn't have the word happy, what would we feel? So if someone comes up and says, so how do you feel today? And you don't know the word happy. Like, how would you describe the feeling? And so some people say, well, I feel joyful and I feel, but we look at happy as kind of this root word, right? And joyful is just really, really happy, right? And so this word happy is so important to our shared experience, right? And so sometimes we're not sad, we're morose, or we're forlorn, or we're somber, or we're grieving. Yes, and so here is an emotional wheel that kind of gives us an idea. This isn't my favorite wheel, but it's okay. So you have all of these different emotions right here, and then you have, these other words that could also be part of that, and then it spreads out to even more. So the idea behind how important language is understanding where we are on that wheel, right? So if I'm going to describe some things, and you tell me what you think I have. So I feel sad more days than not. I feel empty inside. I don't want to get out of bed. I feel alone. So if somebody's telling you that, what might you say to them?
Maybe struggling with depression.
Okay, so now I'm going to add this one word or this situation, and then you tell me how it's different. My brother died. My brother went missing a couple years ago, and we ended up recovering him from a mountainside. He died hiking. So now what might those symptoms describe that I'm feeling?
Grief.
Exactly. So they're the same symptoms, right? But by just one simple word, your response to me is going to be completely different, right?
Mm-hmm.
You might say with the first, it's like, man, you may need to talk to a therapist. You may need to talk to your doctor about some medicine, right? Something like that. Where when I say my brother died, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I've experienced loss too. And let me bake you a casserole and help you with your family, you know, that sort of thing. So just this one word, the symptoms don't change, how I feel doesn't change, but how people respond to us does change, right? So vocabulary is so important. You look at the word love, right? I love my wife, I love my daughter, and I love steak. Okay, so we've got this one word, love. And if you're learning the new language, if you're learning English and you're telling someone, trying to teach them this word love, they're like, okay, love, spouse, okay, I get that. But then you say that about your daughter and they're like, well, that's not the same. And then you say that about steak and they're like, what are you talking, this word, I must not understand it. Because clearly I don't love steak as much as I love my wife, right? So I was talking to a German professor about this, and he's like, that is one of the most frustrating words in our language. He said, in German, there's a word for love of parent. There's a different word for love of spouse. There's a different word for love of friends, because it's different, right? So language is so important. It's how life is experienced, defined. So there's one word, or there may be a word for this thing I'm about to describe, but I might not just know it. But if you have kids, your first child, that feeling when you're leaving the hospital and the nurse doesn't get in their car with you to go home and help you take care of this new thing, like that kind of terror. But then I remember like coming home kind of scared, and we had the playpen up, and so I set my daughter down, and my wife went and laid on the couch and fell asleep, and I was just looking at this precious child, and I'm like, my heart just filled, and I looked at my wife and how incredible she was, and we just grew a human, like that's insane. And then saying this little person is part of me and part of her, and then part of her own thing that's not us. And the feeling was just overwhelming, and love just didn't cover it. Like, we need a word for it. I don't know if we have one, but it's just, I don't know, we need a word for it, because I know all of you have had kids, have probably experienced something similar or not, but sometimes the terror kind of takes over and the fear about it, but it's just an incredible feeling. So we need a word for it. So language is really, really important. So even though the second part, even though life is understood and defined through language, we don't think in terms of language all the time. So if I said to you, cheese, what's the first thing that came to your mind?
Yellow.
Delicious.
Yes, delicious, most definitely. Okay. Did anybody, what did you picture? Did anybody have a picture?
Yellow.
Okay. All right.
I was like thinking of like queso, like chips and queso.
I was thinking cheese.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I've heard some people think about smiling for the camera. Like, I love sharp cheddar. Okay. So Did anybody in their brain, did you print out CHEESE? No, most people don't. So even though life is experienced and defined through language, we don't think in terms of language. We think in terms of images and associations, right? So associations are really important. Our sense of smell creates one of the strongest associations we have. So if you're going to sell your house and you're still living in it and people need to come over and view the house, what might the realtor tell you to do?
Bake cookies.
Yes, cookies or bread, right? Because when we want to attack, if we can walk in and smell this fresh baked bread, our experience with that house is going to be totally different, right? This is why it's important when I talk to kids about hygiene, that it doesn't matter how cool or funny you are. If you stink, if you're the stinky kid, no one is going to want to be around you. Not because you're not awesome, but because you don't smell good. So, so smells is one of the strongest associations our brain makes. But so we think in terms of images and associations and past experiences. So have you ever been about to confront somebody and in your brain you're going over what's going to happen and you're really going to lay into them and this is how it's going to go, and then you get there and you're like, you're so, and you walk away going, what was that? Like, that did not go how it's supposed to go. It's because most likely when we're thinking about that confrontation, we're not thinking in terms of language. Even though in our brain we're seeing ourselves yell at them or say these things, we're not actually saying them. So we can't process it and we can't understand it. So when we actually try to voice it, it sounds garbled, right? So this is why if you're driving past me on the road, I am talking to myself all the time, because until something is put into language, it really can't be processed or understood. This is why we're often told to pray aloud, right? When you say your prayers out loud versus silently, it's a huge difference. For me, my most powerful prayers are when I'm walking in the backyard speaking out loud. It just changes things. It organizes, and this is why therapy can be really important and why communication is so important. Is that it takes what's going on in here in your brain and puts it into language. Because once it's into language, it can be understood, processed, and dealt with. So those two concepts are really important in communication and understanding emotional intelligence. So I'm going to give you some tools to use. And to me, this is like the holy grail of therapy, in my opinion. Like, if you can do these things that I'm going to talk about, you're golden. Like, it's going to be good. So it's going to sound so simple and ridiculous that you'll be like, nah, it can't be that easy. But it's not easy at all, especially if we're a little bit older. So what I want you to do is I want you to eliminate a phrase from your vocabulary. And that is makes me. Okay? No more saying makes me. Because if something makes you, it controls you, right? If you can make me mad, then you control me, right? So if life is understood through language, then when we say you make me, we believe that. We believe that you have the ability to make me something that I wasn't previously, right? So, and I don't want to be controlled by a person or a situation ever, right? And so you eliminate makes me from your vocabulary. So here's a simple example. If I make a cake and it's horrible, is it the cake's fault? No, it's not. Because why? Because I made it, all right? So if someone can make you mad, make you sad, make you happy, then you're a horrible cake, right? So and you don't want to be a horrible cake, right? So what's important is this: I don't ever want you to deny an emotion. I just want you to change the way you say it, because once we change the way we say it, we'll start believing it more. So this will feel fake when you do it in the beginning. And I know half of you will be like, no, Josh is full of it, man. This guy's making me mad, right? But so I want you to change it to something different, because I don't ever want anyone to deny an emotion. if you're angry, I don't want you to say, oh, you made me mad, or, well, I guess I'm not, they can't make me mad, I guess I'm not mad. You know, we don't want that to happen, right? So what I want you to say instead is, I feel. All right, so I feel angry when you speak to me like that. I feel sad when when you act this way. I feel sad, da, da, da. But I want you to do it with good emotions too. Like, the scriptures don't make me happy. I feel happy when I read the scriptures, right? Or, you get the idea. So I feel. And there's 3 things that happen when you say I feel. For one, it creates ownership. I feel angry. It's mine, right? I feel it. So it's mine. I can do what I want with it. Once I own it, like, I can do whatever I want. Amy, you were able to paint your room a new color. Why? Because you probably own your house. It's yours. You can change it. You can do whatever you want with it because it's yours. If you're renting an apartment, then you can't just make changes, right? Because it's not yours, right? So if you make me mad, that's yours. I can't own it because it's you that made me, right? And so I feel, what it does is it creates ownership. And once you own it, you can change it. The second thing that it does, and I think this is where the emotional intelligence comes in,
Josh, I'm going to interrupt you a moment. Do you have a different slide that you want to?
No, this is good.
Okay.
Nope, not yet. So I feel I don't want to own something that's not mine, right? So I don't want to have a conversation with my wife about anger if I'm not mad, right? So what I feel creates the ownership, but also it kind of, if you do it correctly, it kind of forces you to identify the true emotion, right? So anger management classes, I have a hard time with, because most of the time when people when they say they have an anger issue, they don't. Anger is kind of this emotion, a go-to emotion. It's way easier to be angry than it is to be embarrassed or humiliated or feel unloved or feel unwanted, right? It's way easier to be angry, right? And so if someone feels like, has this, I feel angry, well, most of the time they're not angry, there's something else. So this is important when communicating with others, especially kids. Why these wheels are kind of cool to do with kids, right? It's like, Johnny made me so mad. Really? Like, tell me about what happened. Well, they didn't include me in their play. Well, anger kind of doesn't, anger might be there, but it makes more sense that he feels rejected or alone or upset about it, right? But anger's so easy because you can blame someone, you can kick something, and so the I feel part helps you own that emotion. Because again, I don't want to have a conversation with my wife about me feeling angry when really I just don't feel like I'm her number one priority right now, right? And so the I feels, it just takes a lot of practice to just really, and so there's so many conversations I've had with my spouse that have started out with like, no, I'm angry. And then the more I talk to her, the less I realize more and more that I'm not angry. So I've started this thing, and now it's incredible how well it works. I don't even identify an emotion in the beginning. What I say is, now I just say I'm feeling charged. So it used to be I'm feeling emotionally charged, because I hadn't identified the emotion. I definitely felt something, but I didn't want to express anger if it wasn't anger. So it forced me to take a little bit of time to think about, what do I feel, right? What am I feeling? Because right now I'm feeling angry, but that doesn't make sense in this situation, right? And so what is it that I really feel? And so if something happens and I want to like strangle my kids, not really, but that feeling where you're just like, oh, I'm like, I have to step back. Obviously this is my child, they can't make me, so why am I feeling this way, right? And so during this whole pandemic, we've had a lot of people like in an unknown territory, like this helpless, hopeless feeling, right? And so it's come across in a lot of anger and frustration and stuck in a home with everybody. And so there's a lot of emotions that are being felt that aren't being communicated well. And so as maybe leaders or as parents, we have to understand where we sit with our emotions. Like, what am I feeling today? If I'm feeling grouchy, I warn my kids, like, hey, I'm feeling grouchy. I don't have patience right now. It's nothing you're doing, but you know, I'm just feeling grouchy. So like, you better watch it, right? So but anyway, it's important to know where we are emotionally before we start talking to our kids about how their behavior is. And this becomes especially true if you notice something. Sometimes we get irritated. My kids are irritating is basically saying my kids make me irritated. When they did it yesterday and it was fine. They did it the day before and it was fine. I wasn't irritated. They did it the day before and I wasn't irritated. But now today it's irritating me, right? So so you look at a situation, it's like, you know, this happened, like if I get cut off while I'm driving, you know, if I've had a horrible morning, then I'm like, oh, you jerk, da, 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 da. If I'm feeling great, I'm like, oh, wow, dude must be in a hurry, you know, and the situation doesn't change. It has nothing to do with the situation, everything to do with me. So, so the I feels are so important in identifying the true emotion. The third thing that happens when we use I feel statements is that we don't have to own other people's stuff, right? I don't have to own when my wife comes and says, you made me so mad. I don't have to own that. I can't make you anything unless like you allow it. So I'm not taking responsibility for your anger, for your whatever, right? And so once we know this I feel stuff, we have to we're responsible to realize that. So when my wife says, you made me so mad, what I do is reinterpret that as she feels angry that I ... And now if I've been a jerk or been insensitive, then I'm like, okay, yeah, I can totally see why you might feel angry. And this is what you do with kids too. When they're like, he made me so mad. Okay, so what you're telling me is that you feel angry at Jimmy and John, or and you rephrase it in an I feel. And then you can give them more emotions to look at on this wheel. So I want to give just a couple examples of how I've seen this work. So my daughter, when she was a senior, we found out she had polycystic ovarian syndrome. She had thyroid issues. She was insulin resistant. And so she had all these issues, right? Because she was really sporty, like she was very active, played soccer, was a swimmer, but for some reason she was not as thin, right? She had a thicker upper body, and she has allowed me to tell this story. So, and it was so frustrating for her because she was active and in good shape. So once we found this out, my wife is in the fitness world, and so she did all the research on PCOS and what needs to happen in the diet and all that, right? And so because she's insulin resistant, her drinking one milkshake is like me drinking 10. Her body automatically stores it as fat. So that is not good. So, and I'd had these I feel statement conversations with my kids. So Mavini walks in and she's got a milkshake, and she looks at me, she's like, Mom makes me feel so guilty when I drink these. And I was like, you said makes me. I was like, put that in an I feel statement. She's like, I feel Mom makes me feel so guilty when I drink one of these. I was like, no. I was like, Taylor, how does it feel to know that you can't just drink a milkshake? 15 seconds goes by, tears start welling up in her eyes. 30 seconds goes by, they're streaming down her face. 45 seconds goes by, and this whole time she's like, I feel I'm just so mad, and I'm just like, why didn't we find out sooner? And blood. And then she slams the milkshake down. She's like, I don't know how I feel, and walks out. 45 seconds ago, she knew exactly how she felt and whose fault. Guilt, Mom, boom, she was done. Didn't have to think about anything, was kind of bitter towards Mom. By changing it to an I feel statement, it completely changed her experience. Like, oh, wait, Like, what is it that I feel? It was a powerful moment for her in understanding that. Okay, another example, and this is how reinterpreting things can be helpful, and how we don't have to own other people's stuff. So, so I get home from work. Sorry, I get home from work. I've had a great day. I got my my book bag, and I just chunk it on the ground where it goes, where it's always been. And my wife looks at me. She's like, "Oh," I can tell she's keyed up because of the way her body movement. And then she's like, "Oh, you make me so mad. You just come in here and throw your stuff down." Now, I could have said, "What? I just walked in. Why are you yelling at me? That's ridiculous." And some people would say that's justified. She attacked. But what I also want you to do is something we're told not to do, but that's assume. Assume it all comes from a good place. I know my wife loves me and she would never intentionally hurt me. She knows I love her and would never intentionally hurt her. So if I'm feeling hurt by her, it can only be two things. I'm either really sensitive that day, or maybe she just didn't realize how rude that was. And both answers doesn't mean I jump on her. It just means I let her know, hey, that was hurtful, right? So there's no need to be, anyway. Okay, so I reinterpreted what she said. And she said, "I feel angry that you came in and put your book bag down in its place. Because that's my book bag's home. If it's anywhere else in the house, she will bring it to its home, right?" So when she said, "You make me mad, you just come in and throw your one," the reinterpretation is, "I feel angry that you came home and put your book bag where it belongs." So is she angry? No. Anger doesn't make sense in that situation. She's one of the most level-headed people I know. So guess what? She's not angry. And so I was able to say, "Honey, you know I never intentionally do anything to upset you, but I can tell you're really charged. What's going on?" You know, she's like, "I'm just so frustrated because she got a new job and blah, blah, blah." And I was like, "I got this. You go back in the room. I'll clean. Like, I'll finish cleaning. I'll make dinner." And she's like, "No, because I'm a bad mom." And I'm like, "Too bad. I already did it. I'm buying pizza. I'll make sure our kids eat some leaves, some green stuff too. And I'll bring you a salad." So, but that could have been a lot worse. Now, granted, I was in a really good mood, right? So there are times that I wouldn't have responded like that. It would have taken longer to get to the end. But I just remember being like, wow, it de-escalated it because I reinterpreted it and like identified that anger doesn't make sense in this situation, knowing her. So that's emotional intelligence, is being able to understand where you are. And when the word "makes" comes out of my mouth, I have alarm bells go off, because the first thing I ask is, am I allowing a person or situation to control me? And I change it to something else. So those are the three things: ownership, identify the true emotion, and you don't have to own other people's stuff. But it's great when you have more words to describe a feeling. It's awesome, because now I'm not happy, I'm jubilant. Or I'm going to be a grandpa, right? Like in July. I'm so excited. So what I'm really excited for, because people that have grandkids say, "Oh, it's so different." Like, I'm excited for that new emotion that I might feel, right? So, and it could be a combination of all of these on the wheel to a certain extent. But we have to understand our own emotions if we're going to help our kids or help, I know, a congregation. Like we just have to understand. One of the examples in the scriptures I like about anger is when Christ turns the tables over in the temple, right? Well, what was neat before that is it describes that he saw that and then he went and braided a whip. So I don't know, which means it wasn't just this reactive anger. It was like, because I don't know if you carry whip braiding material on you, and I'm sure it's not a towel just wrapped up. So there was some time taken to like feel and to understand, and then to react or to respond, right? So anger what if you hold on to it isn't good. Like that's not where we want to be. But anger itself, it's a natural emotion. We feel it and it's okay. You own it and then you decide what you're going to do with it. So that's my spiel on emotional intelligence and about owning our own stuff.
Josh, something that you said earlier, I am not a mom. I don't have any children, but I hear my friends say that do have families of their own, children and spouses. They'll say, I'm just trying to keep everybody happy. And I think there is no way you can do that.
Yeah.
You know, that's not up to you to do.
Well,
so,
this
really put it in perspective for me.
And she'll be miserable if she
Absolutely.
if she feels it's her responsibility to control other people's emotions. You can't do it. You just can't. It's not your job.
Yeah.
And so, you have to be just wary of that. And because we all try to do it. And this I feel stuff is really easy to do on other people. It's so hard to do with the ones you love. Like it's so hard. But yeah, it can be really powerful. I remember when it first worked for me, like I just came home and I wanted to just scream at everyone. And my kids were irritating me and I like really bad. And I'm like, there's no way this 10-year-old and 14-year-old can control me. So I went in the bathroom and I'm like, what do I feel? I feel so irritated. So why? And then I went through my day and decided it all had to do with work. And then I decided I'm done. I'm not irritated because I'm not at work. And I remember it was gone. Like I walked out. Even my wife was like, what happened? Like it's just gone because I owned it, figured out where it came from and just left it.
Yeah.
But I remember, oh my gosh, this stuff I talk about works. So, but yeah, it's really hard to do it. And what I encourage with couples, when I do couples therapy, 95% of the time, this doesn't happen. They come back and do not, in a heated experience with a spouse, don't say, oh, you said makes me. Like, that doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So our job is to interpret.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I'll have couples back. He pointed out makes me. I'm like, yeah, I know. It was just so easy. She said it. Anyway, yeah. So you don't point that out. You just interpret it in your brain.
Yeah.
But.
Well, and so Josh, something that you've touched on a little bit, and that is reactions and potentially overreactions and overcompensating. That is where just, recently, I'm 50 years old and it has taken me almost 50 years to be able to go, don't react. Don't react. You have to think about this because I need to decide, is this child, is this colleague, is this friend, family member, whatever, are they really saying what they mean, what they feel? And but I've always been such a reactor that just kind of like, oh, there's a fire, let me go get some gasoline and just throw it on it. And make it even better. So can you talk about some techniques as far as helping us not to react so quickly?
So always use this I feel stuff on, don't save it for the huge emotions. You do it throughout the day. I mean, you put it in part of your practice to just, this is why mindfulness is so good, why Pilates might be awesome for people, or yoga is like, it puts you in the here and now. And so what you do is like, I feel good today. And you do that throughout the day. You just take time. Like, I don't care if you have to set an alarm, or you hear the beep at every hour, to just say, how do I feel? So that when someone comes up to you and because the reaction comes from, sometimes we don't know how stressed we are, right? Because it's just how the day's gone. It's just how life is. And so then this is the straw that broke the camel's back and we just respond. So being able to daily and throughout the day, just identify how we feel on the really small emotions. Like you do something like, oh, I feel good. I feel good that I was able to complete that. Or I feel good. I feel proud that I did that. Well, do I feel proud of me? No, because it's really just, I just put the dishes away. Well, like, where's the pride in that? But I feel good. I feel accomplished. I feel good that I completed a task. But you just constantly do that on the small stuff. So then when it comes to the big stuff, you don't react as much because you know where you are. And also, something I constantly say to myself, if I become emotionally charged because of something someone else does, it's my issue, not theirs, right? And especially when it comes to doing therapy with kids, they say some rotten things, right? And so your kids might tell you they hate you, and it's like, oh, I don't own that. That's not really, it's like, I know that's not true. And so, but you don't, once you own your own stuff and don't own others, people, we're not offended so easily. It's like, anyway, I get so fed up with this, so easily offended these days people are, and it's just like, oh my goodness. And here's the thing with the assuming part, you assume it all comes from a good place, even though you're 99.99% sure this person is intentionally trying to upset you, right? Because it's not, I don't care what they're doing. Like, they're not in control of me. I'm not going to, because if they're trying to offend us, the worst thing we can do is be offended. There's a quote, he that is offended when no offense was intended is a fool. He that is offended when offense is intended is a bigger fool, right? So we don't want, so if they're trying to upset us, we think to ourselves, oh no, you know what, this person, they come from a good place, so I'm going to respond differently. I had a colleague that did that at work, where she tried to stab me during our staffings, and I knew it was on purpose, and I knew her intent, and so, but I brought her in and I was like, hey, just so you know, I know it probably wasn't on purpose, but when you said that, it feels like you're questioning my professionality, and so I don't appreciate that. Well, she did it again, and I reacted the same way. It's like, we talked about this, and it had nothing to do with her. Now, inside, I was like, ugh, but I was practicing, right? Like, I'm emotionally charged. What she did was rude and unkind, but who knows where she is in her life, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, we want to assume the best. It's great with kids too. Like, my son has a Nerf sword and he was hitting the big screen TV, right? Had I told him not to? Yes. So my first reaction when he's hitting it again is like, boy, I told you not to. But then all of a sudden it's like, okay, this comes from a good place. It comes from a place of love. Like, my kid is not intentionally being disobedient or rude. So instead I was like, hey bud, turn around. I was like, Evan, TVs aren't for hitting. If you continue to hit the TV, I'm going to take your sword away, and I don't want to do that. Which he heard versus, boy, I told you. Because kids, they see your face, and they see, my daughter called them angry eyes when I got my angry eyes. And they don't necessarily hear the words you're saying because they're like, they have this reaction of fear, or like, and my son he didn't even realize he was hitting it. So did he hit the TV again? Yeah. It took a lot longer though. And he was able to stop himself once or twice, but I took his sword and that was it. So yeah, knowing where we are emotionally helps us not react as much.
That's such good stuff. I'm sitting here thinking of, I have one of my 3 children is huge reactor to situations, and needs to bring others in, and does that very well with his mama. And I suffer that, it'll something will happen, and it affects me for the rest of my day. And I'll call to check on him that night or whatever, and he's like, I'm like, hey, how's it going, or can we revisit this? And he's like, what are you talking about?
That's gone.
Wait, and so yes, and so that is absolutely something I have to work on, not absorbing
Yeah.
and allowing people to control my emotions.
Yeah.
For sure.
Do you know, and one way to do that, it's what I've learned in therapy and with my own kids, is pretend he's not your kid or she. Like
Woo!
how would I respond to a client?
Woo!
So if my client was responding the way my daughter was, what would I do? I certainly wouldn't like berate or be like upset or like, how would I be? Well, I wouldn't be emotionally charged, right? And so the idea is like, okay, it's like, so I've done that before when I've been like, like, because I'm freaking out as a parent because of her choices, and then it's like, okay, she's just a client, and it totally changed. I was like, oh, that doesn't sound like, because as a therapist, we just ask tons of questions. Some of them are leading to where we want the thing we want them to realize, but she's the professional in her life, not me. I don't know how it is to be a 14-year-old female. So what do I know? So I just ask a bunch of questions, and it's awesome. I do that with myself too. Like when my dad died, like 6 months after he died, I was kind of like, I wasn't dealing with it as well as I thought I was, right? Because I'm a therapist. I should know about grief. I help people through it. And so, and something happened and I realized that I wasn't handling it. My wife said, hey, remember Nana's coming up for the kids' dance recital. And I looked at her and I was like, the kids are in dance? And she looked at me because I'm an involved dad. I know what they're involved in. And I picked my kids up every Thursday from dance. So, but I really, when I said that, I didn't realize they were in dance, but I also knew they were in dance. And so I was like, okay, I'm not doing as well as I thought maybe. And so I was like, so if a client came in and was explaining these symptoms to you, what would you do? And the first thing I said, I would say, talk to your doctor about some medicine.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, but I'm going to take it to prove that I don't need it. It's not going to be placebo. And what was frustrating is by speaking to myself like I was a client, it changed. And it's like, I tell people to do this all the time, and I tell them it's okay. Like sometimes we just need help and adjustments. And so I'm like, so why am I fighting it so much? But I was. And so, so I started taking the medicine, and most of the time it takes 3 to 6 weeks to kick in. But for me, within about 10 days, one of my colleagues was like, welcome back, Josh. And I didn't feel any different. Like I still was sad about my dad. I was like, wait, why did you just say that? She's like, well, just welcome back. I'm like, no, like I study behavior too. And I haven't noticed that I'm doing anything different. And she said, you're not shutting your door all the time. You've laughed more in the past week than you have since your dad died. And I was like, really? Like I didn't notice that because I still felt sad because it was appropriate to feel sad, right? But I was behaving differently. And so anyway, but
it helps you shoulder that load.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm not always a huge proponent of medicine if it's not needed, but also if I just have to do this every day and I interact with my wife better, I'm more involved with my kids, then what is stopping someone from doing it, right? But all that was to say, with your situation with your kid, you respond as if this is one of your friend's kids, and all of a sudden it completely changes how you would respond to them. But
yeah, agree.
Sure.
I mean, that's huge. Yeah. So tell me this, for some of our folks who are listening, and we're all thinking about how this applies in our lives with colleagues, or in our lives with our families or our youth groups. When is it time? You talked about medication, you talked about, which is, on down the line, but when is it time for us as an individual or as a parent for our children to make the decision to seek professional help with situations dealing with emotions?
So I think that realization, or that maybe we should think about further help right there, then there's already been this indications that it might need, something might need to happen. Is there the next slide? And then the next one? Okay, so yeah, so because it's hard to kind of determine with kids like where they are, like is this just teenage stuff, is this just so this is just kind of an idea if it lasts for weeks or months, or if it interferes with daily life at home, school, and with friends. So at the next slide, so we're looking for things that are out of the ordinary. Go ahead and switch next slide if it works. Okay, so yeah, these are just different things to look at with kids. And they'll kind of be the same with adolescents, although in kids and adolescents, depression is seen as like real irritable, quick to anger, that sort of thing. Depression kind of displays different than it is for parents, oftentimes because the kids don't have the emotional vocabulary to define what they're feeling. It's not that the sadness is there, but they don't know how to, they have no reason to be sad in their brain, so it's hard to say they're sad. So they'll be upset, angry, whatever. So sleep too little or too much, not interested with doing things that they usually do. Okay, go to the next one. We see a lot of somatic complaints like stomach ache, headaches, where they go and there's nothing wrong. You see that a lot with anxiety. And either, you know, with some more extreme, you see vomiting with kids. And it's actually something they can then just do on cue because they know it gets them out of going to school or something like that, if the parent isn't handling it correctly. But yeah, so these are more for teens, you know, engaging in risky behavior, trying alcohol or drugs. The idea someone's trying to control them. It's hard with teenagers sleeping too much or too little. That's just, you know, they ebb and flow with sleep. But the low energy, lost interest in things they usually do.
Josh, something about one of your points is have thoughts of suicide. And I wanted to point out that Amy Shores has spearheaded youth mental health first aid at Methodist Family Health. And so there are ways that you can be a first responder, as it will, to youth in your youth groups, your church, your community, your home, that can help you look for those signs.
Yeah. Amy, have you heard of the Jason Foundation?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's a great app that like has like these big buttons, and like if my friend is feeling suicidal, then you click on that button and it has these responses. It's great. I encourage kids to download it because it helps. But yeah, so there's a difference between, you know, thoughts of not wanting to live and actual thoughts of suicide, right? It's different, right? But they're both warning signs, right? So we look for any of that. Like I feel like, you know, I feel like I don't want to wake up. If I went to sleep and just didn't wake up, I would feel fine. Like it wouldn't even bug me, versus I want to die. I'm going to do something to cause the death. And of course, anytime any of those pop up, that's when you seek professional help, hopefully before. And you'll see all of this. I mean, if you're not communicating often with your child, if you're not involved with them and know their kind of daily routines and schedules, then you're not going to see these things. So, I mean, one of the crossroads, or what we call the crossroads, is family dinner. Like that's a crossroads. Like this is where we all meet, and so many important things happen during the family dinner time. Like, like I tell families that I'm seeing, I'm like, okay, no, like one of your goals as a family is to have dinner. Like you have a time, you have dinner, because so much happens there, even though they feel kind of torturous sometimes because everybody's yelling or screaming or whatever. I know on Monday nights, we used to have what we call family home evening, where nothing's scheduled. Family night is Monday night. We would give one kid, we'd make these cool boards where where someone has a lesson, someone picks the song, someone's saying the prayer, someone makes dessert, right? And it would just rotate. And so, like we tried to do it with my family, and I called my mom. I was like, "What? Like, these are torture. Like, they're so hard. They fight it so much." And I was like, "How did you do it?" She's like, "You're kidding, right?" It's like, "No." She's like, "You guys were horrible." She was like, "You guys did the same thing." I was like, "Really?" Because all I have is like good memories from that. And so, so sometimes we do things because of the lasting effect, not the immediate, right? Because that is something they will remember, that family time, that interacting. And so, yeah, I mean, in order to notice some of these signs and symptoms, we have to really know our kids. We have to be watching them, and we have to, the key is something is different. Like, this is not normal. Like, this is not normal behavior. If they're always hyper, then that's one thing. You know, we don't say, "Oh, that's too much energy." You look at, well, they're always hyper, and now they're sleeping through class, or they're not engaging, that sort of thing. So that's what we look for.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
Since we just have a very few minutes left, I was going to let our viewers ask any questions through the chat if you would like to. We're just going to take about 5 more minutes. So if you have any questions, please shoot them to us now, and I will make sure that Josh gets those, and we'll see if we can't address them. I will say, while we're waiting to see if we have anything coming through, there is a Kelly and Amy, I don't know if y'all noticed, there's a common denominator from last week.
Yes.
Last week's webinar to this week's webinar, and he just nailed it. From Wesley was talking about being invested in your children's lives, and letting them, which I had called it forced family fun night, but he quickly corrected me and said, no, it needs to be the child or the teenager or the young persons. They need to make some decisions in what they want to do, and so and then you were talking about, you know, the family table, and so anyway, a common denominator there, that we have to be invested in these young people's lives to know where
it can't all be about what the adult wants or thinks is best. We have to, Amy Shores, I think you were talking about, you're playing video games,
right?
You know, and you're like, but that's what, you know, wants to do. So
sometimes
a little bit of give and take for all of it.
With my son, we just sit and watch some YouTube. Whatever he is watching, I sit down next to him and watch. Sometimes we don't talk, but we'll laugh together, and that's important. And so sometimes when I'm just sitting there, he'll be on his phone, but then he'll come and get next to me, you know, or he'll say, "Oh, Dad, check this out," because I just sat down with him and watched it, right? Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I want to thank you, Josh and Amy and Kelly, again for this webinar this week. I want to thank our viewers for being with us. The link to this, the YouTube link to this, we are going to share very soon, and this will also be put into a course that we will be sharing soon. I want to also invite everyone to come back next Thursday. There's going to be one more of these webinars to help with the mental health for our young people. And so if you have, I'm going to stay on for just a few more minutes. If you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and send those to us. But if not, I don't want to take up any more of your time. I know your time is precious. So thank you again, everyone, for being part of this today, and God bless you all.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
So does this mean all the participants are gone?
No, we still have a few participants, and we have a question.
Is Mary on still? Mary Lewis? I can't see the last name.
It doesn't look like it. I think she's...
Okay.
Yeah, my boys don't express a lot to begin with emotionally. I want to check in with them, but they just roll their eyes. How can I do this better? Especially for a senior missing out on things. Yeah, that's rough. Do you want me to address it now, or should I like?
Sure.
Yeah, so yeah, with teens, that's how they are, right? They're only going to express certain things. They don't feel comfortable. Sometimes they don't even recognize what they're feeling, right? So I've had many times where I've sat down with my daughter and I'm like, hey, drop the attitude. She's like, what are you talking about? It's like, you clearly have an attitude. And she's just stumped. And for a while, I was like, oh, that bugs me so much, until I realized she really doesn't know. She doesn't know that she is responding with attitude. And so once I realized that, I'm like, oh, I'm not mad at her. Like, she just doesn't know. And so it was a simple of like, hey, I can tell, sorry. Like when I say you have attitude, this is why, because this is how you're responding and blah, blah, blah. But with kids, yeah, it's going to be tough. For a senior, like I don't know how much the communication is there prior to asking where they are emotionally, but so sometimes what I do with, like, when I can tell one child is a little bit, I've got 2 out of the house now, I just have 1 now, but my older one took a little more work, like she needed more attention, right? So when I could tell she was keyed up and it had been a while, then I would say, hey, Taylor, we're gonna go on a daddy-daughter date Friday. And it was amazing how just that knowledge of us hanging out just helped chill her out. Now that was when she was younger, right? So I made a reason to have her go with me somewhere when she was older and didn't really want to talk. And we would stop at Sonic and get a drink, and we'd talk about something we were interested in, or she was interested in. And so there's 2 different components of communication where we want to have eye contact, right? Because we look for nonverbal stuff. But with kids and adolescents, it's kind of different. As adults, we want to know people are listening. Like sitting down with an adolescent, like, hey, what's wrong? Like they're just like, okay, like they're uncomfortable with the emotion anyway. So some of the best therapy happens in a vehicle, right? Or when you're shooting baskets.
They're
or when you're, yeah. Yeah. Well, and also you're not face to face.
Right.
And also if they're shooting a basket, they don't have to dwell completely on the emotion, right? And so so with this person, even if the kid who's a senior and missing out on things doesn't express how he feels, it may not be because he feels nothing or is keeping it like to himself. It might be that he doesn't know. Because what emotion could it be? It could be anger, it could be frustration, it could be sadness, it could feel the FOMO, fear of missing out, like all of these, like it could be a mix of all of those. And then for you to say, how do you feel about it? They're like I don't know, like, and so do they usually want to focus on emotion? No, they don't. So that's where you talk about, like, so now that you're missing out on your senior year, like the graduation, like what in your mind, like how would graduation have been for you, like that night? Like did you have plans? And then you just get them talking about that sort of thing. And so that they can kind of talk through it. Because remember, until it's put into language, you can't deal with it, right? So when it's just banging around up in their head, and it's a whole bunch of different emotions that they don't even have words for, then they can't deal with it. But I've had so many people that, like I've seen in therapy, where we just identify one thing and they're like, yes. And it's like this huge relief, like, yes, I feel helpless. Or yes, I feel hopeless. And even though it's a horrible thing, it's something that finally has a word to it, right? And so with adolescents, sometimes they have no idea how they feel until we talk to them. And then they don't not tell us because they're keeping it a secret. They probably don't tell us because they don't really know. And this is why constant talk and like really, like, this is how because they might just say, I don't know, I don't know, it's whatever, it is what it is, you know, type of thing. But then you could say, yeah, no, if I think I were you, I would feel like maybe some anger, frustration, maybe sad, you know, and just bring these up so that they have something to look at and say, yeah. But because they might say, no, not angry at all. Like, no, even though their behavior might indicate it seems like you're angry, right? So it's just the communication, like you said, being invested, taking the time.
Yeah. So, Amy, this we're going to go ahead and close it down, but I wanted to also throw in there, Amy, you were part of the webinar that was done by our conference children's ministry team and the leaders there, and they talked about the holy listening stones and helping children identify that emotion, helping adolescents identify that emotion, and that anyway, that just came to my mind that maybe that technique would be helpful here as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Josh, Amy, Kelly, thank you. This has been so good and so meaningful to so many, and will continue to be meaningful to so many because we will be sharing this. So
Awesome.
thank you again. And I just wish God's richest blessings upon you all, and hope to see you soon.
All right. We'll see you guys.